Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard. My guest is Harvey Oberfeld, a retired but still issue-engaged television reporter. He's the founder of Keeping It Real at harveyoberfeld.ca. He's speaking to us from Florida. Harvey, welcome back to the Goddard Report.
Good to talk to you.
Harvey, your latest blog at harveyoberfeld.ca is entitled How BC Anarchist Terrorists Won Control. Well, what are your thoughts on all these protests that are shutting down ports, rail lines, ferry terminals, even the Premier's house, his own personal house?
Yeah, Jim, I could see this coming for quite some time. We have evolved into a society where anarchists, where people on the fringes are now almost in control. And it goes back well before this current dispute and problem with the Wet'suwet'en and the hereditary chiefs. It started years ago on the campuses when people that came and wanted to make speeches or have talks about things that some people disagreed with were all of a sudden prevented from speaking. And I'm not talking about, extreme right or extreme left or, terrorist types. I'm talking about just people who others disagreed with. And it started there where a lot of campuses, even elected leaders, even prominent pundits and people like that were prevented from speaking. And the students who stood up against free speech, how ironic is that on a university campus? The students who stood up against free speech and rallied and protested and even used violence to stop others they disagreed with, they won those battles. I mean, a lot of times the university caved in and kowtowed to them. And that sent out a message that really, if you really are really strident, you can get away with these kinds of things. And now it's expanded. Look at Oppenheimer Park. I mean, there's a situation where you have a bunch of people who have moved in, many of them not even from Vancouver. If the media just had the guts to ask that question, where are you from? I think you'll find out a lot of them are not Vancouver residents, haven't been raised in this area. They've just moved in from elsewhere, taken over this park, and demanded free housing in return for moving off that site. And, of course, that destroys the only major park in the neighborhood for people who legitimately live in the area, who deserve the same consideration that people in Point Grey and Vancouver South get with their neighborhood parks. But the Vancouver Park Board decided, we better not do anything because these people are really radical and they have nowhere else to go. And so they've kowtowed to them. So that's the message that's been going forward for quite some time. And to hell with the majority of the population, to hell with the people who pay the bills, who do the work, who pay the taxes. They have no rights with the current people in some of these offices. The people who don't work, the people who don't contribute, they seem to be running a lot of things that are going on in this province. And now the eco-terrorists, the extremists have watched this and they know what's going on. So they have seized this controversy with the hereditary chiefs. They have seized it into making it a complete eco-battle against the establishment, against capitalism, against corporations, against investment, everything that they want to target, knowing that really in the end nothing will happen to them, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And I blame the politicians at all levels for having no spine to stand up to people who are not protesters. These are anarchists who are breaking the law on issues that have absolutely nothing to do with the gas pipeline from Dawson Creek to Kitimat, and they're getting away with it because the politicians are too weak to stand up to them.
Are these kind of protests growing around the world?
Well, that's what's happening. There's two things actually happening. You have people, look what happened in France. You have an elected government that a lot of people on the left don't like. So they, the Yellow Vests, took over and started their demonstrations, started their protests. Nothing wrong with that. If you don't like what a government's doing, you can have protests. But then they weren't getting their way, and that's the key. People who are unelected, people who are in the minority as far as the voters go in that particular electoral session, they decided, no, we want it our way, even though we are not in power. And when they didn't get their way by protesting, they took to violence. And that's what happens. They end up disrupting the entire society in the belief that eventually they will be able to blackmail, coerce, and even intimidate the elected people into giving into their demands. And that, this is not just happening in BC. It's happened in the rest of Canada. It's happened in Europe. This is something that's going on, of course, except in the various regimes where protesters will just be shot on sight. It doesn't happen there, and I'm not suggesting at any level that we even look at something like that here. But we do have to enforce the laws over here. And the second thing that I think even the left-wing politicians who are allowing so much of this to happen in Vancouver at the park board level, at Vancouver City Hall, at the BC legislature, these eco-friendly politicians who are allowing the anarchists to do what they want and not really pay any consequences, these people are going to actually trigger, I believe, a backlash by the voters moving to the right, because that's what's happened elsewhere. When people have had enough of the mob taking over, they look for an alternative. And the alternative is not something that I necessarily would ever support, because it becomes the far right. And, so in a way, people like the liberals in BC, people like the conservatives in Ottawa, they must be loving this lack of action by the federal government, the BC government, the Vancouver City Hall, the Vancouver Park Board, because they know that eventually the people, the majority are going to get fed up, and as they said in the movie, they're going to be mad as hell, and they're not going to take it anymore. And what they will do, I believe, is they will move to the right, and because the people in power on the left are not doing their job and enforcing the laws that they swore to uphold.
Is that because the average person is in favor of law and order, and they really don't like to see polite society disrupted?
Well, there's a big difference, between a protest and basically terrorism. I mean, eco-terrorism or anarchy. You can protest. If you want to protest outside a corporation, you go protest their offices, protest their plant, protest where they, wherever they operate. A peaceful protest, and you make your point. You don't shut down the railway of the country. You don't shut down the bridges of people going to work, or imagine traveling across the Thousand Island Bridge in Ontario, between Ontario and the U.S. What does that have to do with a gas pipeline between Dawson Creek and Kitimat? It's absolutely ludicrous. And the politicians, they've made it worse by saying, well, what we have to do is have dialogue. No, you don't have dialogue with terrorists. That has always been Canada's position. We do not talk to people who use violence and disruption and to get their way, and terrorism really, to get their way. If they want to protest legitimately, at places, at government offices, you can protest peacefully, but you don't obstruct people who want to go to work. You don't obstruct the passenger services, the freight services across the country, the West Coast Express carrying commuters, have absolutely nothing to do with the issue that they are supposedly protesting. But the truth is, these anarchists they don't care anything about the pipeline, the gas pipeline, or the hereditary chiefs. They are just using that as an excuse and a means to impose their will on a whole number of issues on the government of the people that were elected, because they know the people that were elected are so weak that they won't do anything to them in return.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Harvey Oberfeld. Harvey, is BC Premier John Horgan on the side of the protesters, anarchists, and terrorists, or on the side of the people of BC who elected him?
Yes, and I say that because he's on every side of that issue. I think that he figures he can get votes. The NDP government has, in fact, they themselves don't seem to want to respect the law, the decision, even the majority of voters in the province when it comes to oil pipelines. They fight and they fight and they fight, even though they keep losing and losing and losing and spending millions upon millions of dollars in a futile effort to fight something that the court has found to be legal and it's given approval to proceeding. And of course, Horgan is afraid of offending the people in his base who are extreme eco-friendly activist types, and also he's afraid of the Greens. So he's trying to balance that, but on the other hand, it's his job to enforce the law. And the only time I ever saw him get really angry was when the protesters showed up at his home. All of a sudden now he's fuming and he's furious. Well, he should be fuming and furious that these eco-terrorists shut down the West Coast Express, shut down the Granville Bridge, shutting down places right across the country. That's what he should be really angry about, because these are criminals. These are not protesters protesting a single gas pipeline. These are criminals who are trying to disrupt society, who probably can't stand anything. I mean, they would oppose any project that any resource development or extraction company or transportation company, they don't want anything other than, of course, increased welfare payments, increased support for the environmental movement. And they are not just protesters. These are the criminal element. And when the government says, well, we should try to talk to them, we should try to negotiate with them, they are playing right into their hands. And no government should negotiate with people or even sit down with people who break the law brazenly, and then, of course, they don't even get arrested because the federal government is afraid of offending them. So they say, well, and also hurting their own chances of getting a UN seat. That's on the Security Council. That's another issue that's stopping the federal government from acting and sending in the police. But even here, we send in the police, they stand there. I mean, the police would like to do something more, but they don't have the authority from their elected leaders to do that. And even if they do arrest few who get extreme, they go to court, they'll be given a piece of paper that's worth nothing to these eco-terrorists, to these anarchists, and then they go back, they're released out, and nothing really of consequence happens to them. And that's part of the problem. And Horgan is not really doing his job when he allows this to go on for weeks now, for months, and he doesn't order the police to step in if they are disrupting the public, not just having peaceful protests outside the corporate headquarters or outside where the project is going to be, but actually disrupting public society. Horgan should do his job and have them arrested and have the cases go to court and not just seek a suspended sentence or an injunction. He should have these criminals arrested and imprisoned. And that's the only way that this will stop, because if we don't do anything, it's just going to get worse.
Where is Green Party leader Andrew Weaver on this file in BC?
Well, of course, he's Weaver's a has-been now. I mean, nothing worse than a politician who says I'm leaving. But the Greens themselves, I believe a lot of them support what these eco-terrorists are doing. They won't say that they support their actions, but they do. They're sympathetic. Let's put it that way. And they're part of the problem because they are vying for the same left-wing eco activist support that Horgan and the NDP want to see as the key of winning the next election. So they are very, very weak. The only politician who has impressed me with this at all is Andrew Scheer. And Andrew Scheer, of course, he's got nothing to lose because he's on the way out also. But he has been speaking, he really has been speaking truth to power. If you watch what Andrew Scheer has been doing, he really accused the protesters of appropriating the indigenous agenda. And I couldn't have said it better. That's exactly what they've done. And Scheer denounced the weakest response to a national crisis that he's ever seen from the federal government, from Trudeau. I don't know if I'd call it a crisis yet, but it certainly is one of the weakest responses to a problem that has come up, and a problem of people ignoring the law, these protesters and these anarchists. And Trudeau hasn't done anything because Trudeau is looking for a seat on the Security Council. He's already aware that the UN, now there's a body that should have a say in Canada. Can you imagine that? The United Nations, which is, basically funded and backed and, populated by some of the worst terrorists themselves and, dictatorial regimes and human rights violators, is telling Canada that we're not fair enough to our indigenous peoples. How ludicrous and how ridiculous is that? And Trudeau he's catering to them because he wants that seat on the Security Council. So he's refusing so far to announce any kind of real plan to deal with the protesters who are disrupting our society right across Canada. And instead he says, well, we have to have dialogue and maybe we could set up a meeting. No Canadian government should meet with anarchists or terrorists who are blockading Canadian bridges, railways, and other facilities, and are doing a tremendous amount of harm to the public and to our economy. Shouldn't even meet with them. You should have them arrested and have them put in jail. Meet with the indigenous leaders, meet with the legitimate protesters who have concerns, but never give in to terrorists who are blocking society.
Is Prime Minister Trudeau on the side of these protesters, anarchists, terrorists, or on the side of the people of BC and Canada?
Well, I wouldn't say he's on their side, but he's afraid of them. And he's also afraid, looks to me, like he's afraid of what it would look like to the rest of the world. In other words, the UN, where he's trying to get his prize seat on the Security Council. So he's afraid to act, and he doesn't want to do anything that would cause the rest of the world to see pictures of Canadian police moving in and dragging people off bridges and all that. Well, you try to block a bridge in Saudi Arabia and see how long it takes before the police clear it off. You go try to block a bridge in Russia and prevent people from getting to work and see how long it would take people. Try it in China. Try it anywhere that these people that Trudeau is kowtowing to. You try it over there and see what happens. And yet he's afraid to act here when Canadians are being disrupted, having their lives disrupted, having our economy disrupted, having our railways disrupted, and Trudeau won't do anything that other than issue statements and ask for meetings and say, let's have dialogue. To hell with that. He should have the police move in, and if they're anarchists blocking access to public facilities, stopping the public from going about their business, he should have them arrested, and they should push in court for these people to be imprisoned.
I've seen from various sources that the blockade of the railways alone is costing the Canadian economy anywhere from 60 to 160 million US a week. Do you think this destruction of the BC and Canadian economies is being done by design?
Well, I think a lot of the people who are in this environmental movement, these extremists, there are a lot of people who support, climate change and environmental controls and improvements and that, and I support that. I think we have to move in that direction. I know how serious the problem is, and I don't think we're doing enough that way. But these people who you see blocking the bridges and blocking the railway, They're not interested in having some slight improvement or some move towards cleaner environment. They really are at war with our society. These are what I refer to in my blog. It's like the almost the rent-a-protester group. It's like something from Hollywood casting. These are the agitators. These are the anarchists. These people, they show up at almost every protest. I saw TV interviews. Some people don't even know what they're actually there for. They don't even know. They think it's an oil pipeline. Can you imagine that? And here they are blocking the bridges. I mean, these people have no rights as far as I'm concerned, and they have to be stopped, and about time for government to act.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Harvey Oberfeld. Harvey, is it possible the protesters are being paid in a roundabout way with Canadian taxpayers' money, i.e. welfare?
Well, perhaps the media should investigate who's funding them, because I know when I was working, I certainly didn't have enough time to start traveling across the country and spending days and weeks on, any event, even the ones I enjoyed, let alone protests. Who's paying for this? Who's funding this? I suggested in my blog that a lot of them are probably people who, ironically, are living off the public dole. People on welfare, people getting public assistance, and yet they're doing everything they can to stop those people who are doing the work, who are doing have jobs, from going to work and paying the taxes that support these eco-terrorists in their endeavors. It'd be a very good idea for the media to look into where are they getting the funding. I'd walk up to some of them if I were still working and I'd say, are you missing work today? Just watch the reaction. I mean, that would just be hilarious from the viewer's point of view. And see, well, where do you work? What type of work do you do? And why are you stopping those people who are going to work, who pay the money, the welfare that you people are getting? I would ask that question. And as far as a lot of them might be retired people, professionals, environmental activists and agitators, a lot of them well-funded by nice, comfortable pensions they've had from their professional careers. I'd ask them, too. How would you have felt if people stopped you from going to work when you were working? I mean, the tough questions are not being asked by the media. They're just playing the game of, this one says this and this one says that. But they really have to get in there and start asking the tough questions of the people that are on the bridges, are on the railways, are at the protest sites, and start asking, who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here? How are you funding your visit? Where are you getting the money to do this? And it would be interesting stories, actually, too, rather than just giving them a soapbox to rant and rave and against, whatever their agenda is.
During this crisis, is the left pushing the racism and white privilege narratives?
Absolutely. And what they do, not all of them. A lot of the people on the left are quite upset by what's going on because they realize that this is going to, first of all, it's not helping. It doesn't win friends and influence people. Secondly, I think a lot of them realize this is going to push voters to the right. Remember, the NDP wasn't exactly elected in BC with a major majority. How do you think many people that were sort of just not fed up with the Christy Clark and the Liberals, how do you think they feel about the NDP's actions or inactions in handling these current disputes? I mean, and the blockades and all that kind of thing. I think the NDP, the leftists are in trouble on this. But they do use this. Even when I wrote my blog, right away because I raised the question, about respecting hereditary chiefs and hereditary elders. Well, we all have hereditary elders. Every single society in our midst, every ethnic group, every religious group, every geographic group in Canada. We have elders in our society. We respect them. We should respect them. We listen to them, but we don't give them veto power over all kinds of laws and legislation that is passed by Parliament or by the legislature and approved by the courts. We don't give our elders in every other part of society that kind of veto power. And yet, when I suggested that in the blog, people wrote and accused me of being a racist. You can read the comments on the blog that I'm a racist and I'm a victim of white privilege and all that kind of thing. No, I believe in equality. I believe in fairness. I mean, that used to be the goal we aimed for. Apparently now, no, certain groups have more rights than others, and if you're Indigenous, you can pretty well do anything you want, say anything you want, block anything you want, and oppose anything you want, even though you're not even elected as a band chief or anything like that. You can do whatever you want, and there's a lot of people on the left who will say, yeah, go for it, baby, go for it. I'm with you, even though you weren't elected to anything, even though you're flaunting what your own people who are elected have agreed to, and even though you're disobeying the law, even though you're breaking the law, go for it. Well, that's not the way society functions, not in a democracy. And the last time I looked, we're still in a democracy, and it should be respected, and it's not being.
Well, if you just went by hereditary privilege, then I guess we should go back to just being ruled by the Queen and forget about Parliament.
Well, the Queen, or what used to worry me more, or certainly I had showed more respect when I was young, for my grandparents. I mean, and look at, there are many societies in BC where the elders are very well respected, and so it should be. But we don't give them veto power over all the kinds of decisions that we legitimately make. We show them respect, but no court has actually ruled that the elders who are the hereditary chiefs, although they do have a role in society, and every hereditary group of elders in every part of our society deserves respect and deserves a role and being listened to, and for their wisdom and things like that. But they don't have veto power over the elected people. I've never seen that in a court ruling saying that, and you never will. So, but they're not really the problem. The hereditary chiefs, they're one problem with regard to that issue with the gas pipeline. I realize that. But the real problem facing Canada is quite separate. It's the rule of anarchy by the activists and the anarchists, and to some extent the eco-terrorists who are blocking railways, blocking bridges. I mean, trying to shut down, the economy. Those people have absolutely nothing to do with the gas pipeline, and they're impacting a lot more than the gas pipeline. Those people are just anarchists and terrorists, in my view, and they should be arrested and they should be imprisoned.
What has happened to the justice system in BC and Canada?
Well, it's operating the way it was set up to operate under in the last couple of decades. They issue court papers. Nobody pays any attention to them. If it happens often enough, they sort of say, "Are you ignoring me?" And then they call the people into court and they give them a sentence and then they suspend it. So, I mean, with a record like that, who could blame the anarchists from saying, "Well, nothing's going to happen"? The courts are not fulfilling their role. The politicians are not fulfilling their role. And that's why the demonstrations, the protests, the anarchy has gotten worse and worse and worse, because there are no consequences to those criminals who are disrupting society, impacting society, hurting the vast majority of society whenever they come into contact with them. And people have absolutely nothing to do with the gas pipeline. And the courts are not doing their job in putting these people away and teaching them that you cannot disrupt society, you cannot impose anarchy on our society. Instead, when you just give them a suspended sentence or some sort of injunction that's not worth the paper it's written on, and nothing happens, all you're doing is encouraging more of it.
When politicians order the police to stand down against the will of the country and the rule of law, have they committed a crime?
I don't know if it's a crime. I'm no legal expert on that. But it certainly is, it's politically, I would say even immoral, that we have police forces who are told to uphold the law. We don't want them to go about cracking heads and, doing things like that violently. But if the public is being disrupted, then it's the politicians' role, it's their duty to have those laws enforced that are hurting the majority of Canadians who are just trying to get to work, just trying to carry out their jobs, and to companies that are just trying to do business to feed their families and feed their employees' families. The police have a role to perform, but they can only perform that role if the politicians have the backbone to tell them, yes, go ahead, do your job.
I was just going to say, isn't it already against the law to block a railway or a highway?
Absolutely. But you can see, you look at the consequences so far. What's the consequences? The politicians are saying, well, maybe we should have a meeting. No, I'm afraid that's not the way it works. If any kind of terrorist act, any kind of imposition on the public, any kind of disruption of the economy in our society illegally, when they block a bridge, block a railway, or block commuters, even block people traveling between the Rainbow Bridge across the border to the U.S. or the Thousand Islands Bridge, those people should be arrested, they should be charged, and they should be imprisoned and fined large amounts of money. If they don't pay the fine, they should be taken into custody and made to pay the price in prison. You can't let them get away with it, because all you're going to do is encourage them to do more.
Prime Minister Trudeau held an emergency meeting with opposition leaders except Andrew Scheer. What kind of message does that send?
Well, it's interesting that Trudeau seems to be willing to meet with just about anybody, but he won't meet with the retiring leader of the opposition.
The official opposition.
The official opposition. And, Scheer has given notice that he was, he's leaving, but still, he has a role to play. He's one of our elders. I guess we could say, in a way, he's one of the parliamentary elders. And, I think Trudeau should be expected to show him the same respect he's showing these other elders who are quite happily breaking the law.
Well, Scheer was the youngest speaker in House of Commons history, so I guess he is an elder.
Well, he's an elder now. He's gone on from elected office. He's supposed to impart wisdom, but apparently he doesn't, as far as Trudeau's concerned, he doesn't even deserve to be at the meeting. Maybe Trudeau should start imposing that kind of discretion on the people he does meet with who are involved in this issue. Maybe we'll get a resolution if Trudeau showed a little backbone and started practicing with the First Nations and the agitators and the anarchists, what he does with Andrew Scheer.
I guess Scheer should have blocked a railway somewhere.
Well, I wouldn't advise it, but if he does, nothing will happen to him.
Harvey, can you tell us a bit about your blog and how people can follow you?
Well, I do it periodically when I'm not traveling, and it's out there. It's called Keeping It Real. And you just Google my name and it comes up, and I just try to rant. When I was reporting, I used to be very assiduous about just covering what others were saying, and I didn't really try to show my own opinions, because that's not the role of a journalist when you're reporting. But now that I'm retired, I can rant and rave and say whatever I want, and a friend of mine set it up just years ago for having something for me to do and keep active and keep involved. And I was amazed. It's got, I haven't checked in a few months, but at one point it had almost 60,000 people reading it every month. I only do 3 or 4 a month. So it has influence, and I think we've made some good impressions with some of the points we've taken on various issues in the province, such as proportional representation, which I opposed, and the HST, which I opposed, and things like that. So people are paying attention, and hopefully we have some influence. And I also give a forum for people to comment, much more so than they can in the local newspapers. We get a lot of discussions going. Sometimes the discussions, I think, are better than what I wrote originally. So it's out there, and it's I just do it for fun when I'm not traveling and enjoying my retirement.
Harvey, thank you so much for being on the Goddard Report.
You're welcome.
My guest has been Harvey Oberfeld, founder of Keeping It Real on harveyoberfeld.ca. He was speaking to us from Florida. If you have any questions for our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.